my way.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Up next, we have a really exciting lightning talk from Kevin Bethune. He is the founder and chief creative officer of Dreams Design Life, a think tank that delivers design and innovation services using a human-centered approach. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Renee. Appreciate you and Amari having me and the invitation here to join this conversation. Let me just quickly share my screen. I just have a few visual anecdotes to walk through. And personally, I'm still ruminating on Brother Cobb's great talk. Definitely, parallels that we need to think about in terms of how we navigate with our work, with our profession, with our field. So again, my name is Kevin Bethune. I'm the founder and chief creative of Dreams Design and Life, but I'm also a first-time author with a book coming out March 15th called Reimagining Design, Unlocking Strategic Innovation. And this book is the 10th book in a series, what is called the Simplicity series at the MIT Press. And it was started by one of John Maida's seminal works, The Laws of Simplicity. Other books in that series include Mismatch from Cat Holmes, and the 10th will be Reimagining Design. So just really quick, as part of this lightning talk, I want to talk through the ambitions that I had for the book, my story of multidisciplinary leaps that informed perspective of what I call unlocking strategic innovation. And then through every chapter of the book, this thread of diversity ringing true, as well as how we might have a servant leadership tact as we work together to shape what is hopefully a better and more vibrant future for us all. So quickly on ambitions, from recent career chapters and having to scale and stand up design capabilities within organizations and spaces that hadn't necessarily understood the strategic power that design could have as a problem-solving capability, was my next book, my first book, going to be additional canon to the existing literature on design thinking. But at the start of landing my contract with the MIT Press, at the start of the pandemic, I think with everything going on, it was like the first time that I had a chance to kind of slow down and really deeply reflect on those career experiences, but then also the interplay with my personal origin story and my family's origin story in terms of how that sort of informed where we are in today's sort of state of affairs. And so really deeply reflecting on lived experiences, realizing that the book afforded some runway to be able to do that. And then it became less a book around design thinking and more about design's positioning as a potent strategic influencing force, and then making sure that our voice as a Black community is seeding in that, informing that, and influencing that for the better. Because as we know, and it's consistent with Brother Cobb's talk, that everything that we navigate, every space, every institution, every enterprise is the way it is by design. And if we understand that, we can unpack that together. So just to rewind a little bit, my journey from youth started with a curiosity and a creative appetite for drawing, but notions of design and innovation were sort of far in the wind. Those notions felt like 1,000 miles away. But I did remember a few anecdotes growing up, watching TV. I would see the Nike commercial of the runner on the treadmill. Some of us that are old enough to remember that commercial, the runner on the treadmill with all this laboratory equipment on them was a pretty cool sort of sight. And that was sort of an early signal of what could potentially be innovation. Then also taking the family road trip down to Disney World to see relatives in Florida, but visiting the Epcot Center and looking at the future sort of exhibitions of world building that were on full display sort of captured my imagination. So when it came time to take that first step into career, I decided to study mechanical engineering, which wove together drawing, mathematics, and science. And I entered the nuclear power industry, the nuclear power generation industry as a first chapter of career. And so I spent the next 5 years working over what you're looking at as an open reactor vessel with the coolant flooding the system. And us engineers and technicians, we would actually build long-handled tooling and robotics and underwater camera systems, and we would work through the water to upgrade those components far below. And that was an exciting experience to really help cut my teeth on product in that world, as well as learn how to work with high-performing teams. Well, fast forward, a natural curiosity for business layered on top of that tech background, and that led to pursuing an MBA to add that business layer, that business language to my background. But that creative itch from my youth kept scratching, and I told myself, I want to join my next organization. I want to navigate an organization that has creative faculties, as well as the strategy, as well as the technology. And thankfully, Nike afforded me a path into their organization. I started in a business planning capacity, but the product person from within figured out how to quickly navigate over to the product side of Nike. And that was the first time that I saw design as a formal profession. And upon showing some of my newfound creative friends, drawings and stuff that I would do for hobby, it wasn't until I met Dwayne Edwards, who was at the time was the footwear design director of Jordan Brand. He gave me a few briefs that didn't have enough designers apply to them, and he agreed to mentor me through my first footwear design project. So we're able to put a couple of shoes out in market, and honestly, it was a soul-searching journey to figure out like what creativity could mean for my what was becoming a multidisciplinary career path. And I had a choice, a big fork in the road. I could either claw and scratch in the Nike environment looking for more side hustle shoe projects, or I could go really solidify my creative foundation and accelerate that learning and position my career at the intersection of design, business, and technology and stand for innovation from this day forward. So I chose the latter, ended up studying additional grad schooling at ArtCenter College of Design. And as I was finishing up my coursework there, I met a small group of business partners that were very much interested in the same brewing multidisciplinary thesis. And we just started working together out of sheer faith. And our work for a couple large corporates attracted the likes of some very big players in the private equity management consulting spaces. And BCG ultimately, acquired our team. We became known as BCG Digital Ventures, and I had the opportunity to demonstrate what design could do, especially in an arena that had critical influence in terms of how the BCG relationships informed many of the world's global enterprises. So we actually stood up a capability that was the inverse of management consulting. We created innovation studio environments where we would ring fence designers, strategists, technologists, and we would tell the clients to live with us in residence so that we could actually build things, build solutions, build businesses, and spin them out. And, for example, Bosch Engineering would come to our Berlin studio with a question around mobility. How do we get in mobility? Well, we would ring fence the multidisciplinary team, go on a journey together, prototype, and the team ended up spinning out an e-scooter ride-sharing mobility platform for some of the mega cities across Europe. And that startup has been since acquired by a bigger mobility parent. So these businesses were real. Well, fast forward, well, amazingly thankful to BCG and giving us that runway to try and prove some things, I became more focused on a couple topics of passion, where I wanted to spend more of my calories on than being all things to all industries. And so 4 years ago, I decided to start my own platform in Dreams, Design, and Life. One around, let's work on truly human-centric problems, unlocking human potential, human connection. And then secondly, I wanted to marry a lot of the physical as well as digital creation competencies that I've accumulated over my career. And so no surprise, I started working with a lot of Internet of Technology or Internet of Things startups up and down the West Coast, from cryptocurrency wallets to health and wellness platforms, to really just helping organizations, both startups and large corporates, unlock strategic innovation. And I think through that experience, I'm a big believer in the galvanizing power of what you get when you spend more time together across disciplines than not. Everyone has seen this Venn diagram, but it tends to be the exception, not the rule in most enterprises. And the work that I've been a part of, gosh, over the last 10 plus years, it's been more the rule, not the exception. And I'm a big believer that multidisciplinary collaboration is the currency that will inform future innovation. That team affords us the ability to see the future through a multitude of different vantage points. We can unpack the future and imagine different futures across the lens of people, industry paradigms, we can bring in trends, and not just tech trends, but the full categorization of trends that are at our disposal to sort of inspire and inform the art of the possible. We can find exemplars, the startups, the researchers, the luminaries that are living proof of those trends taking shape, and we can galvanize those ingredients together to spark creative opportunities. Well, this notion of bringing design, technology, and business together, it has been a fascinating journey, but I think if anything, the last 24 months have shown us that it's not enough. We need to think about that broader ecology and enter any opportunity with a wide aperture to have respect and consideration for the broader ecological paradigms that are at play, whether it's data ethics, sustainability, equity, and addressing what you would call societal imbalance, right? So consistent with Brother Cobb's talk, we have to also unpack, no matter what space, what environment, what enterprise that we're navigating, we have to unpack the threads of systemic inequity that have informed the platforms of today. It's critically important. And if we're imagining what is hopefully better futures, we have to have a respect for historical relevance. And for me, honestly, when the summer of George Floyd, and definitely not being a paradigm that was anything new to the Black community, I mean, definitely it's personal, and tying the covert, jarring acts of killing and tragedy with the overt with the covert, and the coverts of overt, and vice versa. It's personal. I take it personal. And many want to sort of manipulate history or say, oh, that happened so long ago. What are you complaining about? Again, I think each of us take it personal in different ways. And the next image I'll show, I have to give a trigger warning in that it's an image from my own family history. The next photo was a photo taken from the Tallahassee Democrat in the early 50s. My mother was the baby that's less than 2 years old in the picture, being held by my late grandmother. And my mother was one of 10 kids. And this is a photo of some of the siblings and my grandmother and my mom being held, returning from church that Sunday morning to find that their home had been burned to the ground by white supremacists and the forces that wanted to put basically a freeway through the neighborhood. This was sort of the result of my family's resistance to some of those dynamics and the jarring, overt tragedy that occurred. And this was one of many episodes that are sort of shared around the dinner table when our families get together for reunions. So again, this is personal, and it informs how I see the world, how I navigate, how I think about empathizing with others. And it just informs the full breadth of what I bring to the table as a creative collaborator. So I'll round this lightning talk with the thread of diversity that runs through every chapter of the book. So when we think about ourselves as individuals, individual creatives, professionals, practitioners, we each bring a subject matter expertise. And again, the last 24 months of the pandemic, sometimes we might have felt like we were in a bubble, or the bubble within the bubble. Even those that are not from the Black community, right? We all sort of feel like isolated from our physical connection with other people. But we still have to remember that we are supposed to be serving a intersectional, multifaceted, hyper-connected world. And for any design or innovation studio that espouses to want to be world-class, this is who you're serving. You're serving a hyper-connected world. And anywhere you go across America, at least, the Black community can range from 10 to 40% of the population, depending on where you are. And if your teams don't reflect that, then we have a huge problem. You're riddled with blind spots. And so the question becomes, how do we sort of lead and shape organizations as we think about embracing design as a strategic capability to influence our problem solving, and then ensure that those future design and innovation studios are mirrorings of the worlds that we're serving. And for me, at least in my corporate experience, there's a gradient between what I would call two ends of the extremes in terms of behavior. You're either sort of playing to the gatekeeper end of the spectrum or the servant leadership end of the spectrum. And there's just 7 dimensions that I talk about in the book, but I want to just quickly go through here to give you a flavor of what servant leadership can mean, at least from the experiences that I talk about. The first is, how do we set direction for any opportunity? Are you a leader that expects compliance from your team? Or do you invite team into an integrated vision and give them pieces to own themselves through role clarity? Where are we on the spectrum? Second, risk tolerance. Are we risk averse in all things? Or do we balance risk and reward and allow people to fail and fail forward? Third, when it comes to hiring, are we hiring to comfort fit? How well does this person fit in? Can I have a beer with them? Where is their edge? Like, we've probably all heard these terms before in the workplace. Or are we hiring for potential, right? Are we able to see that people have had different lived experiences that offer tremendous potential if we take the risk to sort of embrace and feed into that and show them what the bar of success is and be honest with people? Are we hiring for potential? 4, when it comes to giving feedback, are we passive aggressive with our feedback, or are we delivering objective success criteria so people understand where the bar is, where they need to perform, and hopefully give them the runway to raise the bar and show you a better way? 5, measurement. Are you playing to subjectivity, or are you delivering sort of specific, measurable, action-oriented results and time-bound goals that are very clear for people to understand how they can hit it? 6, when it comes to team composition, are you seeking culture fit, or are you seeking diverse, equitable, inclusive teams that can really push you for the better? 7, leadership orientation. Are you always leading from the front, taking credit, or are you sometimes stepping back and allowing your team to shine and giving them runway to lead from the front themselves? So all that to say, whether it's reflecting on your lived personal and professional experiences, when you think about bringing that full self that you can bring to the table to help teams unlock strategic innovation, and then appreciate the thread of diversity in terms of not just being the right thing to do from a human perspective, but also the business imperative that represents for any institution and enterprise that we're talking about. And that essentially gives me a lot of hope. And that if you're underrepresented person coming from a marginalized background, I hope my book provides inspiration that there's a lot still possible for your life despite the obstacles. And for those allies that are out there, I hope the book gives you more ingredients for you to learn and threads to follow. So I want to thank you for the time for this lightning talk. Thanks, Renee.
Wow, fantastic.